They left her to die in the mud like an animal. In 1880s, frontier America, a Chinese woman named Mei Lin is beaten unconscious while an entire town watches and does nothing. The sheriff turns his back. The crowd disperses. She's just another immigrant, disposable, unwanted, barely human in their eyes. But when a scarred mountain trader named Rowan Hale offers her one chance to escape before dawn, Mei Lin faces the hardest choice of her life. Flee into the wilderness with a dangerous stranger, or stay and let Willow Ridge finish what it started. Stay with me until the end of this story. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Mei Lin's journey travels. The mud tasted like iron and shame. Mei Lin's face pressed against the street, rain mixing with blood from her split lip, and somewhere above her the world continued as if she didn't exist. Boots splashed through puddles. Voices murmured. A woman laughed, high and sharp, like breaking glass. No one helped. She tried to push herself up, arms shaking, but her vision swam and she collapsed again. Her ribs screamed where the kicks had landed. 3 of them, maybe 4. She'd stopped counting after the second man joined in. That's what you get, stealing from honest folk. She hadn't stolen anything. The baker's wife had dropped coins and Mei Lin had picked them up, held them out to return them. But the woman had screamed anyway. Her husband had come running, and then the accusations flew faster than Mei Lin could follow with her broken English. Thief! Chinese thief! The truth didn't matter in Willow Ridge. It never had. Someone's boot came down near her head, not on it, just near, a warning, and Mei Lin flinched so hard her whole body convulsed. Laughter erupted. She squeezed her eyes shut, tasting salt now along with the iron, and wished she could disappear into the earth itself. That's enough. The voice carried authority. But when Mei Lin cracked one eye open, she saw Sheriff Dawson standing 10 feet away, arms crossed, making no move to come closer. His badge caught the gray afternoon light. His face showed nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, nothing at all. She learned her lesson, Dawson said. Let her crawl on home. Home. The word was a joke. The boarding house where she rented a corner of a room wasn't home. The laundry where she worked 16 hours a day wasn't home. Home was an ocean away, in a village whose name she whispered to herself at night to remember it was real, that she'd once belonged somewhere. The crowd began to disperse. Mei Lin heard their footsteps, their voices fading as they returned to their lives. The baker and his wife, the men who'd kicked her, the women who'd watched and done nothing. Even Sheriff Dawson, his boots heavy on the wooden boardwalk as he walked away. She was alone in the mud. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The rain kept falling, cold enough to make her teeth chatter. Mei Lin managed to get to her hands and knees, then had to stop as nausea rolled through her. Her braid had come loose, black hair hanging around her face in wet ropes. One of her shoes was missing. She couldn't remember when she'd lost it. The walk back to the boarding house took forever. She kept to the alleys, staying out of sight, one hand pressed against her ribs. Every breath hurt. Her reflection in a shop window stopped her cold, face swollen, one eye nearly shut, dress torn and filthy. She looked like something discarded. Maybe that's all she was. Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house sat at the edge of town, a sagging 2-story building that housed the people Willow Ridge tolerated but didn't accept. The Irish laborers, the Mexican workers, the Chinese laundry women. Mei Lin climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing. Her roommate, Anna, gasped when she opened the door. Dios mío, what happened? Fell, Mei Lin whispered. The lie came automatically. What was the point of truth? Anna couldn't change anything. No one could. Anna helped her to the thin mattress in the corner, brought water and rags, dabbed at the cuts on Mei Lin's face with surprising gentleness. She muttered in Spanish, words Mei Lin didn't understand but whose meaning was clear enough. Anger, sympathy, helplessness. You should leave this town, Anna said finally. It will kill you if you stay. Mei Lin closed her eyes. Leave and go where? She had $17 saved hidden in her shoe, not enough for passage back to China, barely enough to survive a month anywhere else. And besides, what made her think the next town would be any different? She'd come to America following promises, her uncle's letters describing golden opportunities, speaking of a cousin who'd opened a restaurant, of Chinese communities where you could build a life. But her uncle had died of fever before she arrived. The cousin had disappeared into the mountains, And the community he'd written about turned out to be 6 desperate people living above a gambling den in San Francisco. A local missionary had found her sleeping in an alley, brought her to Willow Ridge, promised her honest work and Christian charity. The work was honest. The charity was conditional. And Christianity, Mei Lin had learned, looked different depending on the color of your skin. That night, lying on her mattress while Anna snored softly across the room, Mei Lin stared at the ceiling and felt something inside her crack wider. Not her ribs. Those would heal. Something deeper. The part of her that had kept hoping things might get better. They wouldn't get better. They would get worse. She was 23 years old and so tired she could barely remember what it felt like to not be tired. The next morning she could hardly move. Her ribs had stiffened overnight, turning each breath into a negotiation with pain. Anna had already left for her job at the hotel. Mei Lin dressed slowly, biting her lip to keep from crying out, and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Kowalski intercepted her in the hallway. "You're late for work. Mr. Chen won't be happy." Mei Lin nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "And you owe me for last week's rent. $2. "Tomorrow," Mei Lin managed. "I get paid tomorrow." Mrs. Kowalski's mouth pinched. "You better. I don't run a charity." The laundry was 6 blocks away. Mei Lin walked slowly, every step jarring her damaged ribs. When she arrived, Mr. Chen took one look at her face and his expression soured. "You fight?" he demanded in Cantonese. "No, I don't care. You work. We have orders." The laundry was already stifling, steam rising from the huge vats where shirts and sheets boiled. 3 other women worked there, all Chinese, all silent. They glanced at Mei Lin's battered face, but said nothing. Sympathy was a luxury they couldn't afford. Mei Lin took her place at the washing board and tried to ignore the pain screaming through her torso every time she bent over. The lye in the water burned her cracked hands. Her vision kept blurring. Twice she had to stop and breathe through waves of dizziness. At noon, Mr. Chen brought them rice and cabbage. They ate standing up, shoveling food into their mouths in the 10 minutes they were allowed. One of the other women, older, touched Mei Lin's arm gently. "Be careful," she whispered. "This town is getting worse." Mei Lin knew. Everyone knew. 2 months ago, a Chinese man had been found hanging from a tree outside town. The sheriff had called it suicide. Last month, someone had burned down the building where 5 Chinese railroad workers slept. No one was arrested. The newspaper had blamed unknown agitators and dedicated more space to complaining about the Chinese Exclusion Act not going far enough. The afternoon stretched endlessly. Mei Lin's hands moved automatically, scrub, rinse, wring, hang, while her mind drifted somewhere else. She thought about her mother's face, though the memory was fading, about the village well where she'd drawn water as a child, about the day her father had told her she was going to America, to help the family, to send money home. She'd sent money for the first year. Then her uncle died and she lost track of how to reach her family. For all she knew, they thought she was dead. Maybe that would be easier. When the workday finally ended, Mei Lin collected her wages, $4 for the week, and walked back through town as the sun set. She kept her head down, stayed on the far side of the street, tried to make herself invisible. It didn't work. "Hey, China girl!" 3 young men stood outside the saloon, already drunk despite the early hour. Mei Lin recognized one of them. He'd been part of the group that kicked her yesterday. She kept walking. "I'm talking to you." Footsteps behind her, getting closer. Mei Lin's heart hammered. The street was nearly empty. No one would help. No one ever helped. "Leave her alone, Travis." The voice came from the shadows beside the general store. A man stepped into the fading light, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been broken and poorly reassembled. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw. His clothes were rough, practical, the kind worn by men who spent more time in wilderness than towns. Travis stopped. "This ain't your business, Hale." "Didn't say it was. Said leave her alone." "Or what?" Rowan Hale. That's who this was, Mei Lin realized. She'd heard the name. A trader who came through Willow Ridge every few months buying furs and selling supplies to prospectors and trappers. He kept to himself, spoke little, and had a reputation for being dangerous in ways that made even the rough men in town cautious. "Or I'll make it my business," Hale said quietly. The threat hung in the air. Travis looked at his friends, then back at Hale. trying to decide if his pride was worth the risk. After a long moment, he spat on the ground. "She ain't worth it anyway." They walked away, laughing too loud, pretending they'd chosen to leave. Mei Lin stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Hale looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable, then turned to go. "Wait," Mei Lin called out, the word emerging before she could stop it. He paused. "Thank you," she said in English, the words clumsy in her mouth. Hale nodded once, brief, then disappeared into the gathering darkness. That night, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. Her body hurt too much, but more than that, her mind kept circling back to those few seconds on the street. Someone had helped her. A stranger, for no reason she could understand, had helped. It didn't change anything. Tomorrow she'd wake up and scrub laundry until her hands bled. The people of Willow Ridge would still look through her like she was made of glass. Sheriff Dawson would still turn away. But someone had helped. 3 days later, it happened again. Mei Lin was walking back from the general store. Mr. Chen had sent her to buy more lye, when she heard shouting. A crowd had gathered near the livery stable. Her instinct was to go around, avoid whatever was happening, but curiosity pulled her closer. A Chinese man knelt in the dirt, hands tied behind his back. Blood ran from his nose. Standing over him was the livery owner, a huge man named Garrett, who'd never spoken a kind word to anyone Mei Lin had seen. "You think you can just take what you want?" Garrett bellowed. "Think because you're willing to work for nothing, you can push us all out?" "I didn't," the man on the ground tried to say. Garrett kicked him in the stomach. The man doubled over, gasping. Mei Lin's hands tightened on her package. She should walk away. Getting involved would only bring trouble, but her feet wouldn't move. "That's enough." Rowan Hale's voice cut through the noise. He stood at the edge of the crowd, arms loose at his sides, but something in his posture made people step back. "Stay out of this, Hale," Garrett warned. "What did he do?" "Stole from me." "Did he?" Garrett's face reddened. "My word against his, and I know whose word counts in this town." "Then it's settled," Hale said calmly. "Let him go." "The hell I will." Hale took a step forward. Just one step, but the crowd shifted nervously. Even Garrett, who outweighed Hale by 50 pounds, seemed to reconsider. "You're making enemies," Garrett said, but he was already backing down. "Wouldn't be the first time." Garrett spat, then cut the ropes binding the Chinese man's wrists with more force than necessary. "Get out of my sight, all of you." The crowd dispersed, muttering. The Chinese man scrambled to his feet and disappeared into an alley. Hale watched until everyone was gone, then his eyes found Mei Lin standing there. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Hale walked away without a word. That night, Anna noticed Mei Lin's distraction. "What's wrong with you? You keep staring at nothing." "Have you heard of Rowan Hale?" Mei Lin asked. Anna's eyebrows rose. "The mountain man? Everyone's heard of him. Why?" "He helped me. Twice now." "Helped you how?" Mei Lin explained. Anna listened, her expression growing more concerned. "Be careful," Anna warned. "Men don't help for nothing. They always want something." "He didn't ask for anything." "Not yet." Mei Lin knew Anna was probably right. In her experience, kindness always had a price. But something in Hale's eyes had been different. Not pity, not desire, just a kind of steady recognition. Like he saw her as a person instead of a problem. It was dangerous to hope. Hope made you stupid. But she couldn't quite kill it. 2 weeks passed. Mei Lin worked, saved money, kept her head down. Her ribs healed slowly. The bruises on her face faded from purple to yellow to brown to nothing. She began to think maybe the worst was over. Then Mrs. Kowalski told her the rent was increasing. $2 more per week, the landlady announced, starting now. "But I can't." "Then find somewhere else." There was nowhere else. Every boarding house in Willow Ridge charged the same, and most wouldn't take Chinese tenants at all. Mei Lin did the math and felt her stomach drop. After rent and food, she'd have almost nothing left. Saving enough to leave would take years instead of months. She was trapped. That night, she sat on her mattress and counted her money for the 100th time. $37. It might as well have been 37 cents. Anna watched from across the room. "You need to get out of this place." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. California? Oregon. My cousin says there are Chinese communities up north, places where you could..." I can't. Mei Lin's voice broke. I have nothing. I am nothing. That's not true. But it felt true. It felt like the truest thing in the world. The next day at the laundry, Mr. Chen was in a rage. One of the other women had quit without notice, running off with a gambler who'd promised her a better life. Now they were short-handed and the work was impossible. Faster, Chen shouted. We have deadlines. Mei Lin's hands were already cracked and bleeding from the lie. She worked faster anyway because what choice did she have? The woman beside her started crying silently, tears running down her face as she scrubbed. At the end of the day, Chen docked their pay for being slow. Mei Lin walked home in a daze. Her hands throbbed. Her back ached. She had $5.30 in her pocket, and it wasn't enough. Would never be enough. Nothing would ever be enough. She was so focused on her misery that she didn't notice the group of men until she was almost on top of them. Travis and his friends. 4 of them this time. Well, the China doll. Mei Lin's heart stopped. She looked around frantically. The street was empty, the sun already down. No one to help. No one to even witness. We got interrupted last time, Travis said, moving closer. Had to cut our fun short. Mei Lin backed away. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. Leave me alone, she managed. Or what? You gonna cry for Hale? He's not here to save you now. They surrounded her. Mei Lin felt her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. One of them grabbed her arm, and she tried to pull away, but he was too strong. Let's teach her some manners, someone said. The first punch caught her in the stomach, driving all the air from her lungs. She doubled over, gasping. Another blow hit her shoulder. She fell, hitting the ground hard, and then they were all around her, kicking, laughing. Not again, please, not again. But there was no one to hear her prayers. She curled into a ball, arms over her head, and waited for it to end. Pain bloomed everywhere, her ribs, her back, her legs. Someone grabbed her hair, yanked her head back. She saw Travis's face, twisted with ugly satisfaction. This is what you get, he hissed, for thinking you belong here. Then everything stopped. Mei Lin heard shouting, the sound of bodies hitting bodies, grunts of pain that weren't hers. She uncurled slowly, vision swimming, and saw Rowan Hale standing over Travis, one hand fisted in the man's shirt. Touch her again, Hale said, his voice deadly quiet, and I'll break every bone in your hands. Understand? Travis nodded frantically. Hale released him and Travis scrambled backward, his friends already running. In seconds, they were gone. Hale knelt beside Mei Lin. Can you stand? She tried. Failed. Tried again with his help and managed to get upright, though everything spun. He steadied her, one hand on her elbow, not grabbing, just supporting. I'm taking you to the doctor. No money, Mei Lin whispered. I didn't ask if you had money. He half carried her 3 blocks to Dr. Morrison's office. The doctor took one look at her, and his mouth tightened, but he said nothing, just gestured to the examination table. Cracked ribs, he pronounced after a careful inspection. Bad bruising. You need rest. Can't rest, have to work. You work like this, you'll make it worse. Have to work, Mei Lin repeated. What did he think would happen if she didn't? That her rent would pay itself? That food would appear from nowhere? Dr. Morrison looked at Hale. Some wordless communication passed between them. Stay off your feet for 3 days minimum, the doctor said finally. I mean it. Outside, night had fallen completely. Hale walked Mei Lin back toward the boarding house, matching his pace to her halting steps. They didn't talk. What was there to say? At the boarding house steps, Mei Lin stopped and looked at him properly for the first time. His face was hard to read in the darkness, all shadows and angles. Why do you keep helping me? She asked. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Because nobody else will, he said finally. Then, you planning to stay here? Where else would I go? North, Oregon Territory, Montana, places where being Chinese matters less than being able to work. I have no money, no way to get there. Another long pause. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A window slammed shut. I'm leaving tomorrow at dawn, Hale said, taking a load of supplies up to the mining camps. Could use someone who can cook and manage camp. Pays not much, but it's better than laundry work. Mei Lin stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're offering me a job? Offering you a choice. You want to stay in this town? That's your business. But if you want out, wagon leaves at first light. Think about it. He turned to go. Why? Mei Lin called after him. Why would you do this? Hale stopped. When he looked back, something in his scarred face seemed almost sad. Because I know what it's like, he said quietly. Being somewhere that wants you dead. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Mei Lin stood on the steps, her mind reeling. A choice. He'd given her a choice. She climbed the stairs slowly, every movement agony, and found Anna waiting with worried eyes. What happened to you? Same thing that always happens. Anna helped her clean up, gasping at the new bruises, the cuts, the swelling. You can't stay here. This town will kill you. I know. That night, Mei Lin lay on her mattress and tried to think rationally. Going with Hale was insane. She didn't know him, didn't know where he was really going, or what he really wanted. Men didn't help women for nothing. Anna was right about that. But staying was death. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Another beating, another assault. Eventually they'd go too far and her body would be found in an alley, and Sheriff Dawson would shrug and say she probably deserved it. She had $37. Her few belongings fit in one small bag. No family here, no real friends, nothing tying her to this place except fear and habit. Fear and habit. What a pathetic reason to die. Outside, the first gray light of pre-dawn crept across the sky. Mei Lin made her decision. She packed quickly, moving as quietly as she could to not wake Anna. Her hands shook as she folded her spare dress, her few undergarments, the jade bracelet her mother had given her. Everything she owned in the world fit in one canvas bag. Anna woke as Mei Lin was tying her shoes. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. Mei Lin nodded. Where will you go? I don't know. Away. Anna got up, crossed the room, and hugged Mei Lin tightly. Be careful. Trust no one. I won't. And write to me if you can. Let me know you're alive. I will. They both knew she probably wouldn't. This was goodbye. The final kind. Mei Lin slipped out of the boarding house as the sun touched the horizon. The town was still mostly asleep, just a few early risers beginning their day. She walked toward the livery stable where Hale had said to meet him, her bag clutched tight, her heart hammering. What if he wasn't there? What if he'd been drunk, or joking, or had forgotten entirely? What if this was all some cruel trick? But when she rounded the corner, she saw him. A wagon loaded with supplies, 2 horses hitched and ready. Hale was checking the harness, his movements methodical and sure. He looked up as she approached. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes acknowledged her presence. You're here, he said. I'm here. It's not easy where we're going. Cold, dangerous. You might regret this. I already regret staying, Mei Lin said. Something that might have been approval flickered across Hale's face. He gestured to the wagon. Get in. We leave now. Mei Lin climbed onto the wagon seat, her ribs screaming in protest. Hale settled beside her and took the reins. With a click of his tongue, the horses started forward. They left Willow Ridge as the sun rose, gold light spilling across the valley. Mei Lin didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. She looked forward instead, toward the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks sharp against the morning sky. Somewhere up there was a future she couldn't imagine. It might be better, it might be worse, but it would be hers. For the first time in 3 years, Mei Lin chose herself. The first mile out of Willow Ridge, Mei Lin thought she'd made a terrible mistake. The wagon jolted over ruts in the road, each bump sending fresh pain through her cracked ribs. Her hands gripped the wooden seat so hard her knuckles went white. Hale sat beside her, silent as stone, his eyes on the trail ahead. The only sounds were the creak of wheels, the jingle of harness, and the occasional snort from the horses. Mei Lin wanted to ask where they were going, how long the journey would take, what exactly he expected from her. But the question stuck in her throat, and anyway, Hale didn't seem like a man who invited conversation. By mid-morning, they'd left the valley behind. The road, if you could call it that, narrowed to little more than a track winding through dense forest. Pine trees towered on both sides, blocking out most of the sky. It was beautiful in a way that made Mei Lin uneasy. She'd lived in towns her whole life, first in China and then here. All this wilderness felt wrong, too big, too empty. You gonna be sick? Hale asked suddenly. Mei Lin realized she'd been holding her breath. No. You look green. I'm fine. He grunted, unconvinced, but didn't push it. They rode in silence for another hour before he finally pulled the wagon to a stop beside a narrow creek. We'll rest here. Water the horses. Maylin climbed down, her legs stiff and aching. Every movement reminded her of last night's beating. She watched as Hale unhitched the horses and led them to the water, his movements efficient and practiced. He'd done this 1,000 times, she realized. This was his life. The wilderness, the solitude, the endless travel. What had she gotten herself into? You should eat something, Hale said, tossing her a wrapped bundle from the wagon. Got a long way to go yet. Inside the cloth, she found bread and dried meat. Her stomach turned at the thought of eating, but she forced herself to take a bite. The bread was stale, the meat tough and salty, but it was food, and she was hungry. Hale ate standing up, his eyes constantly scanning the trees around them. Looking for what? Maylin didn't know. Bears? Wolves? Or something worse? How long? She asked finally. How long what? Until we get where we're going. Depends. Weather holds, maybe 5 days. Storm comes through, could be 7 or 8. 5 days minimum. Maylin had never been away from a town for 5 days in her life. And when we get there? Mining camp called Silver Creek. About 40 men working claims up there. They pay good money for supplies and better money for hot meals and clean clothes. He glanced at her. You said you can cook? Yes. It was mostly true. She could make rice, simple dishes. Whether that would satisfy 40 hungry miners was another question. Good. You'll earn your keep then. He said it matter-of-factly, no threat implied, but Maylin heard the unspoken contract anyway. She wasn't a passenger, she was labor, same as she'd always been. The only difference was the location. They finished eating and climbed back onto the wagon. The afternoon wore on, the sun moving across the sky in patches of light that broke through the trees. Maylin's body settled into the rhythm of the journey, the constant jolt and sway, the squeak of wood, the smell of horse and pine, and her own unwashed skin. She must have dozed off because she woke to Hale's hand on her shoulder. Don't fall off, he said. The road had gotten worse, barely visible now, more rocks than dirt. On one side was the hillside rising steep and covered in brush. On the other side was nothing, a drop-off that fell away into shadow. One wrong move and the whole wagon would tumble down. Maylin's heart climbed into her throat. She pressed herself against the seat, afraid to even breathe too hard. Relax, Hale said. Horses know the way. We're going to die. Probably not today. It wasn't funny, but it's something in his dry tone made Maylin's panic ease slightly. She focused on his hands on the reins, steady, confident, no hesitation. He'd done this before, many times. If he wasn't worried, maybe she didn't need to be either. Maybe. They made it past the worst section as the sun started to set. Hale guided the wagon into a small clearing and began setting up camp with the same efficient movements he did everything. Maylin watched, useless, not knowing how to help. Can you start a fire? He asked. No, I don't know how. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not anger exactly, more like he was recalculating what he'd taken on. Come here, he said. He showed her how to gather kindling, how to arrange it, how to strike flint and steel until sparks caught. It took Maylin a dozen tries, her hands clumsy and shaking, before a tiny flame finally took hold. She felt ridiculously proud of herself. Good, Hale said. Now keep it fed. Small pieces first, then bigger once it's going strong. While she tended the fire, he set up a canvas shelter and unpacked supplies. By the time full dark fell, they had a decent camp, fire burning, coffee boiling, beans heating in a pan. They ate without talking. The food was plain but filling. Maylin couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten by firelight under open sky. Maybe never. In China, she'd lived in a village with packed houses and narrow streets. In America, it had been boarding houses and laundries, always walls, always roofs. Out here, the sky went on forever. Stars everywhere, more than she'd ever seen, so many they looked like spilled salt. Beautiful, isn't it? Hale said, following her gaze. Frightening. Why? Too much space, too much everything. He considered that. You'll get used to it. Will I? You will or you won't. Either way, you're here now. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. Maylin appreciated that more than false reassurance. She slept that night under the canvas shelter, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like smoke and horses. Every sound made her jerk awake, branches cracking, animals moving through the brush, the wind picking up. But Hale slept soundly a few feet away, his rifle within reach, and eventually exhaustion pulled her under. Morning came too early. Her whole body ached, her ribs throbbing with each breath. Hale was already up, the fire going, coffee ready. "We've got a hard day," he said by way of greeting. "Road gets worse before it gets better." Worse. Maylin didn't know how it could get worse, but she was learning not to question him. They packed up camp and started moving as the sun rose. The trail climbed steadily upward, the horses straining against the weight of the loaded wagon. Twice they had to stop and move fallen logs blocking the path. Hale worked with an axe, chopping through wood, while Maylin stood uselessly by. "Can you drag the small pieces off the road?" he asked, breathing hard. She could. Barely. Her ribs screamed in protest, but she did it anyway, grabbing branches and hauling them to the side. By the time they cleared the path, sweat soaked through her dress despite the cold air. "Good," Hale said, and climbed back onto the wagon. That night, he showed her how to care for the horses, how to brush them down, check their hooves for stones, measure out grain. His hands were gentle with the animals, she noticed, gentler than they were with anything else. "You like horses," she observed. "Horses don't lie. Don't pretend to be something they're not." "Unlike people." "Unlike people," he agreed. On the third day, they reached a section where the trail crossed a fast-moving stream. The water ran high from recent rain, churning white over rocks. Hale studied it for a long moment. "It's crossable," he said finally, "but it'll be rough. Hold on tight." "Can't we go around?" "Not unless you want to add 3 days to the trip." Maylin looked at the water and felt her stomach drop. "What if the wagon tips? Then we get wet." He said it like it was nothing, just an inconvenience. Before she could argue, he urged the horses forward into the stream. The cold water hit the wheels and the wagon lurched. Maylin grabbed the seat, her knuckles white, as water sprayed up around them. The horses struggled, finding their footing on the slippery rocks. The wagon swayed dangerously. For one horrible moment, Maylin was certain they were going over. Then the horses found solid ground and pulled them up onto the far bank. Hale let out a breath. "See? Fine." Maylin's hands were shaking. "You're insane." "Maybe, but we're across." That night, as they sat by the fire, Maylin finally asked the question that had been building. "Why did you really bring me?" Hale poked at the fire with a stick. "Told you. Need someone to cook and manage camp." "You could have hired anyone, someone who knows this country, someone useful." "You're useful. I can barely start a fire. I don't know how to shoot or hunt or any of this." She gestured at the wilderness around them. "So why me?" Hale was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkness. "Had a sister once," he said finally. "Sarah. She was different, something wrong with her mind from birth. She'd talk to herself. Couldn't always tell what was real. Our father thought she was cursed, wanted to send her away to an asylum." He paused, his jaw tight. "I tried to protect her. Wasn't enough. One winter when I was out trapping, he did it anyway. Put her in a place where they chained people to beds and called it treatment." His voice went flat. "She died there. Pneumonia, they said. But I know the truth. That place killed her because she was inconvenient." Maylin's chest hurt, and not from her ribs. "I couldn't save her," Hale continued. "But when I saw you in that town getting beat while everyone watched, I don't know. Maybe I thought I could do something right for once. I'm not your sister." "No, you're not. But you deserved better than what that place was giving you." They sat in silence after that. Maylin didn't know what to say. This man she barely knew had shared something painful, something true, and it changed the shape of everything between them. "Thank you," she said finally. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't survived the mountains." But there was something almost like warmth in his voice. The fourth day brought the first real test. They were climbing a steep section of trail when one of the rear wheels hit a rock wrong. The whole wagon lurched sideways. Maylin heard wood crack, a sound like a gunshot. And then they were sliding backward, the horses screaming, Hale fighting the reins. "Jump!" he shouted. Maylin threw herself off the wagon, hitting the ground hard and rolling. Pain exploded through her ribs, but she kept rolling, getting clear, as the wagon slid another 10 feet before Hale somehow got the horses under control. They stopped just short of the edge of the trail where it dropped into nothing. Maylin lay on the ground, gasping, her vision spotted with pain. She heard Hale calling her name but couldn't answer yet. Everything hurt too much. Then he was kneeling beside her. "Are you injured?" "Maylin, talk to me." "Ribs," she managed. "Same ones." He helped her sit up carefully. His face was scratched from branches, bleeding slightly, but he ignored it. "Can you breathe?" She tested it. "Yes, it hurts, but I can breathe." "Good. That's good." He stood, looking back at the wagon. "Stay here. I need to check the damage." The rear axle was cracked, but not broken. Hale spent the next 2 hours reinforcing it with rope and spare wood, his hands working steadily despite the cold. Maylin sat against a tree and watched, feeling useless again. When he finally finished, the light was fading. "We'll camp here tonight," he said. "Too dangerous to keep going in the dark." They made a cold camp. No fire. Too risky on the steep slope. Hale shared his blanket with her because she was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. The warmth helped, but Maylin couldn't stop replaying that moment when the wagon had started to slide. "We almost died," she said. "But we didn't. We could have. That's true every day." He shifted, getting more comfortable against the tree trunk. "You did good, though. Jumped when I told you to. No hesitation." "I was terrified. Being scared and being smart aren't the same thing. You were both." It was maybe the nicest thing anyone had said to her in years. The 5th day, they reached the snow line. Maylin had seen snow before, but never like this. Deep drifts that came up past her knees, covering everything in white. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Her fingers went numb, even wrapped in the spare gloves Hale had given her. The wagon struggled through the snow, the horses laboring with each step. Hale had to get down several times to dig out the wheels. Maylin helped as best she could, scooping snow with her bare hands because they had no shovel, her skin turning red and then white. "We need to keep moving," Hale said, his breath fogging. "Don't stop. Don't sit down. You stop moving in cold like this, you don't start again." So they kept going even when Maylin's legs felt like they might give out, even when she couldn't feel her feet anymore. Even when the wind picked up and the snow started falling fresh, cutting visibility to almost nothing. Hale tied a rope around Maylin's waist and attached the other end to his belt. "So we don't lose each other," he explained. They walked beside the wagon now, leading the horses, because riding was too dangerous when you couldn't see the trail. Maylin put one foot in front of the other and tried not to think about what would happen if they got lost up here. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, Hale pointed ahead. "There. See it?" Through the swirling snow, Maylin made out a dark shape. A cabin, small and rough, but solid. Shelter. Getting the horses and wagon under the lean-to beside the cabin took the last of their strength. Inside, the cabin was freezing, but at least blocked the wind. Hale got a fire going in the stone fireplace while Maylin collapsed onto a wooden bench, shaking uncontrollably. "Get those wet clothes off," Hale ordered. "Frostbite's no joke." He turned his back to give her privacy. Maylin struggled out of her soaked dress with numb fingers, wrapped herself in dry blankets from the wagon. Her feet were white and waxy looking. Scary. Hale checked them, his touch professional. "Not too bad. You'll keep your toes." But it was close. He made hot coffee and they sat by the fire, not talking, just warming up. Gradually, feeling returned to Maylin's extremities in painful pins and needles. She'd never been so cold in her life. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "This time of year? Pretty much." "How do you stand it?" "You get used to it, or you leave." He glanced at her. "You holding up okay?" Maylin thought about it honestly. "I don't know. Ask me when I can feel my feet again." That got a small smile from him. They stayed in the cabin for 2 days, waiting out the worst of the storm. Hale taught her things during that time: how to properly maintain a fire, how to melt snow for water, how to ration supplies. He showed her how to sharpen a knife, how to tie knots that wouldn't slip, how to identify animal tracks in the snow. Why are you teaching me all this? Mei Lin asked on the second day. Because knowing keeps you alive. But I'm just cooking for miners. I don't need to know how to track deer. You never know what you'll need. Better to know too much than too little. So she learned. Her hands were clumsy at first, her mind slow to grasp concepts that seemed obvious to him. But Hale was patient, showing her again and again until she got it right. On the third morning, the storm cleared. They packed up and continued on, the world transformed into something crystalline and strange. The snow reflected sunlight so bright it hurt to look at. Mei Lin's eyes watered constantly. Here, Hale handed her a piece of cloth with slits cut in it. Tie it around your eyes, helps with the glare. It looked ridiculous, but it worked. The world dimmed to something manageable. Late that afternoon, they finally reached Silver Creek. The mining camp was bigger than Mei Lin had expected, maybe 20 rough cabins scattered along a frozen creek, plus several larger buildings that looked like they might be a store and a bunkhouse. Smoke rose from chimneys. Men moved between buildings, stopping to stare as the wagon rolled in. Hale pulled up in front of the largest cabin. A man emerged, big and bearded, his face splitting into a grin. Hale, you son of a gun! Thought maybe the snow got you this time. Not yet, Dutch. Hale climbed down, clasped the man's hand. Brought supplies and help. Dutch's eyes found Mei Lin. His expression didn't change much, but she saw him take in her face, her Chinese features, and make his calculations. This is Mei Lin, Hale said. She'll be handling meals and laundry. Anyone gives her trouble answers to me. It wasn't a request. Dutch nodded slowly. Fair enough, we could use decent food. Jenkins burns everything he touches. Other men had gathered, watching. Mei Lin felt their eyes on her, measuring, judging. Some looked curious, some looked hostile. All of them looked hungry. Show us what you got, Hale, someone called out. While Hale and Dutch unloaded supplies, Mei Lin stood beside the wagon and tried not to think about the fact that she was the only woman in a camp of 40 men. That she was Chinese in a country that had passed laws saying people like her weren't welcome. That everything she owned fit in one bag, and she was completely dependent on the protection of a man she'd known for less than a week. A younger man approached, maybe 20, with a friendly face. You really going to cook for all of us? I'm going to try, Mei Lin said. Well, anything's better than Jenkins's slop. I'm Danny. Mei Lin. Yeah, Hale said. You come far? Willow Ridge, Danny whistled. Long trip in winter. You're tougher than you look. It was meant as a compliment, she thought. She managed a small smile. Hale finished with Dutch and came over. I'll show you the cookhouse. It's basic, but it'll do. The cookhouse was a long cabin with a massive iron stove at one end and rough tables filling the rest of the space. It smelled like old grease and burnt coffee. Mei Lin looked around and felt overwhelmed. How was she supposed to cook for 40 people in here? You'll figure it out, Hale said, reading her expression. I'll help you get started. That first night, they made it work. Simple food, beans, bacon, cornbread. Mei Lin's hands shook as she cooked, terrified of burning something or under-seasoning or making some mistake that would turn these men against her. But the food came out okay. Not great, but edible. The miners ate like they were starving, which they probably were after months of Jenkins's cooking. They didn't talk to Mei Lin much, but they didn't bother her either. Small mercies. After dinner, Hale found her scrubbing the massive pots. You did good. It was barely passable. It was hot and filling. That's all they care about. Mei Lin's arms ached. Her back ached. Her ribs ached. Everything ached. But she'd survived the day. That counted for something. Get some rest, Hale said. You've got another 40 mouths to feed tomorrow. He'd set up a small room for her off the cookhouse, barely more than a closet with a cot and a stove, but it was private and it was hers. Mei Lin collapsed onto the cot fully dressed and was asleep in seconds. The days fell into a brutal rhythm. Up before dawn to start the fire and get coffee going. Breakfast for 40 men, oatmeal, bacon, bread, clean up. Start preparing lunch. Serve lunch, clean up. Start preparing dinner, serve dinner, clean up, collapse. Her hands cracked and bled from the constant washing. Her feet hurt from standing all day on hard floors, but slowly she got better at it. Learned to manage the massive stove, to cook in quantities that still boggled her mind, to time everything so hot food hit the tables when the men came in hungry. Hale checked on her daily, bringing supplies, helping with heavy lifting, running interference when anyone got too friendly or too hostile. He was a constant presence, steady and reliable. "You don't have to watch over me all the time," Mei Lin said one evening. "Maybe I want to." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because everyone needs someone watching their back. Even me." It was an admission of vulnerability she hadn't expected. This hard man, this survivor, acknowledging he needed help too. 2 weeks in, a miner named Carter started causing problems. He'd been hostile from the start, making comments just loud enough for Mei Lin to hear, calling her the China doll, asking when she'd be offering services beyond cooking. Hale had shut him down once, but it didn't stick. One afternoon, Carter came into the cookhouse while Mei Lin was alone preparing dinner. "You and Hale sleeping together?" he asked. Mei Lin kept chopping vegetables. "No." "Why's he keeping you then? Pretty thing like you, there's got to be a reason." "I cook. That's the reason." Carter laughed. "Sure, that's all." He moved closer. Mei Lin gripped the knife tighter but didn't look up. "You know, you're wasted on just cooking. Could make good money doing other things. I'd pay." "Get out." "Come on now, don't be—" The door slammed open. Hale filled the frame, his expression dangerous. "Out," he said quietly. Carter smirked. "We're just talking." "Out, now." Something in Hale's voice made Carter reconsider. He left, but not before giving Mei Lin a look that promised this wasn't over. Hale waited until the door closed. "You okay?" "Fine." "He touches you, you tell me." "I can handle it." "I know you can. Tell me anyway." That night, Mei Lin lay in her small room and thought about Carter, about the 40 other men in camp, about how alone she was out here. But she also thought about how she'd stood there holding that knife, unafraid, ready to use it if needed. When had she become someone who could do that? The answer came slowly. She'd always been that person. Willow Ridge had just convinced her she wasn't. The next challenge came from nature instead of men. A huge storm rolled in, dropping 3 feet of snow in 2 days. The camp was completely cut off. Supplies that Hale had planned to fetch from a lower camp couldn't be reached. Food started running low. "We've got maybe a week of regular rations," Hale told Mei Lin. "After that, we'll need to stretch it." "How do we stretch it?" "Smaller portions, more filler, less meat." Mei Lin did the math. 40 hungry men doing hard physical labor, eating less, trapped in a camp with nowhere to go. It was a recipe for trouble. She started planning immediately. More beans, less bacon, bread stretched with sawdust. She'd heard of it being done during hard times. Soups that were mostly water but filled bellies anyway. The men grumbled, but they ate. What choice did they have? On the 5th day of the storm, one of the support beams in the supply shed collapsed under the weight of snow. Hale went to fix it and didn't come back. Mei Lin waited an hour, then 2. Finally, she put on every piece of warm clothing she owned and went looking. She found him pinned under the fallen beam, his leg trapped, his face gray with pain. "Get Dutch," he managed. "Dutch is at the far claim. It's just me." She studied the situation. The beam was massive, easily 300 pounds. She couldn't lift it, but maybe she could move it. Mei Lin looked around the shed frantically. There, a long pole that had been used for something. And there, some rope. And there, a rock that could serve as a fulcrum. Physics, leverage. The same principles that had helped her survive the laundry, scaled up. She wedged the pole under the beam, positioned the rock, tied the rope to add her weight to the lever. Then she pulled with everything she had. The beam shifted, inch by inch. Hale gritted his teeth and dragged himself free just as Mei Lin's strength gave out and the pole slipped. They both collapsed in the snow, breathing hard. "How did you know to do that?" Hale asked. "I didn't. I just figured it out." He looked at her with something like amazement. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first. We're even." But they both knew it was more than that. The balance had shifted. She wasn't just someone he was protecting anymore. She was someone who could protect him back. Dutch and another miner helped them back to camp. Hale's leg was badly bruised but not broken. He'd be off it for a few days, though, which meant Mei Lin was on her own. She managed? Barely. The cookhouse became her whole world. Fire, food, cleaning, repeat. She lost track of time. Her hands worked automatically while her mind drifted. She thought about this woman she'd been in Willow Ridge, afraid to make eye contact, apologizing for existing. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The woman she was becoming, the one who'd saved Rowan, who'd crossed mountains in winter, who fed 40 men daily and didn't flinch when they complained, she barely recognized her either. But she liked her better. The storm finally broke. The camp dug itself out. Supplies were restocked. Life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in a mining camp. Hale's leg healed. He started moving around again, helping where he could, though Mei Lin noticed he favored that leg in cold weather. One evening, they sat in the cookhouse after everyone had eaten, drinking coffee in companionable silence. "You've changed," Hale observed. "How?" "You stand different, like you're not trying to disappear anymore." Mei Lin considered that. "Maybe I'm not." "Good. The world tries to make people like us invisible. Screw that. People like us? The ones who don't fit, who make others uncomfortable just by existing." He met her eyes. "You're strong, Mei Lin. Stronger than you thought. Hell, stronger than I thought." It was the longest speech she'd ever heard from him, and maybe the most important. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did." Hale smiled, a real smile, rare and genuine. "Right back at you." Winter deepened. The days grew shorter, the cold more intense. But Mei Lin adapted. She learned to love the silence of snow falling, the particular quality of winter light, the satisfaction of keeping the cookhouse warm and the food coming. She learned other things too. How to shoot, because Hale insisted. How to track game, just in case. How to read weather signs in the sky. How to survive. And slowly, without quite realizing it, she stopped thinking of herself as the broken woman who'd crawled out of Willow Ridge. She was just Mei Lin, whole, capable, free. Spring came late to the mountains, arriving in fits and starts. A day of warmth, followed by another blizzard. The world caught between seasons. Mei Lin watched the snow melt from the cookhouse window, revealing muddy ground and the first brave shoots of green. She'd been at Silver Creek for 4 months now. It felt like 4 years. The miners were restless, eager to get back to their claims now that the creeks were starting to flow again. The energy in camp shifted from the dull endurance of winter to something sharper, more volatile. Men who'd been cooped up too long got into fights over nothing. Arguments erupted at dinner over whose claim was producing, whose partner was lazy, whose turn it was to haul supplies. Mei Lin stayed out of it, kept her head down, did her work. But she noticed things. The way Danny had stopped eating much, his face growing gaunt. The way Carter and his friends huddled in corners, talking in low voices that stopped when anyone approached. The way Hale watched it all with narrowed eyes, his hand never far from his rifle. Something was building. She could feel it like pressure before a storm. "You should carry this," Hale said one morning, pressing a small pistol into her hands. Mei Lin stared at it. The metal was cold and heavy. "I don't need—" "Yes, you do. Things are getting tense. Carter's been talking." "About what?" "About how it's not right. A Chinese woman taking wages that could go to a white man. About how you're probably stealing. The usual garbage." His jaw tightened. Most of the men don't agree with him, but some do, and that's enough to be dangerous. Mei Lin slipped the pistol into her apron pocket. It pulled the fabric down, a constant reminder of its presence. "When does it stop? The hatred?" "Never?" Hale's voice was flat. "People like Carter need someone to look down on. Makes them feel bigger. You can't change that. You can only make sure you survive it." She knew he was right, but the knowledge sat bitter in her stomach. That afternoon, she was washing dishes when Carter walked into the cookhouse. Alone. The last of the lunch crowd had left 10 minutes ago. The timing wasn't accidental. "We need to talk," he said. Mei Lin kept washing. "About what?" "About you leaving." Her hand stilled in the water. "I'm not leaving. See, that's the problem." Carter leaned against the table, trying to look casual, but his body was coiled tight. "You're taking up space that don't belong to you, taking work from people who actually belong here." "I work. I earn my keep. You're a woman, and Chinese. You don't earn nothing, you just take." Mei Lin dried her hands slowly, turned to face him. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "If you have a complaint, take it to Hale. Hale's the other problem. Man's gone soft, protecting you. It's not natural." "Then leave. No one's forcing you to stay." Carter's face darkened. You got a smart mouth for someone in your position. And what position is that? He pushed off from the table, moving closer. Mei Lin's hand drifted toward her apron pocket, to the pistol hidden there. Alone. Vulnerable. One Chinese girl in a camp full of men who could... The door banged open. Danny stood there, breathing hard like he'd been running. Carter, Dutch wants you. Something about the North claim. Carter's eyes never left Mei Lin's face. We're not done. Yeah, we are. Danny's voice was firm. Come on. After they left, Mei Lin had to sit down, her legs suddenly shaky. Danny had saved her, she realized, deliberately interrupted before things could escalate. The quiet boy who'd been so friendly her first day had been watching out for her. That night she sought him out in the bunkhouse. Thank you for earlier. Danny looked embarrassed. Wasn't nothing. It was something. You didn't have to. Carter's an ass. Most of us don't think like him. He hesitated. But some do. You should be careful. I'm always careful. Be more careful. The warning stayed with her. She started varying her routines, never walking the same path at the same time. She kept the pistol loaded. At night, she wedged a chair under her door handle. Hale noticed. Good. Stay sharp. You think something's going to happen? I think Carter's a coward, and cowards are dangerous when they feel cornered. He checked the rifle he was cleaning, efficient movements that spoke of long practice. But you're not alone in this. Remember that. A week later, Hale told her they were going to the trading post. We need supplies, and there's people I want you to meet. It's a 2-day ride. You up for it? Mei Lin was more than up for it. She was desperate to see somewhere beyond Silver Creek, to remember there was a world outside this camp. They left at dawn, just the two of them and the wagon. The trail was muddy from snowmelt but passable. Mei Lin felt herself relax as they put distance between themselves and camp. Out here, it was just wilderness and silence and the creak of wagon wheels. You've gotten better at this, Hale observed. The traveling. I had a good teacher. And you were a quick student. Some people never adapt. They just suffer and complain. I did my share of suffering. Sure, but you didn't stop there. That's the difference. They made camp that night beside a stream running fast with meltwater. Hale caught trout with his hands, a trick he'd tried to teach Mei Lin before with no success, and they cooked them over the fire. The fish was sweet and tender, better than anything she'd made in the cookhouse. Tell me about before, Mei Lin said. Before you became a trader. Hale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I was a soldier, fought in the war, the bad one, the one that split the country. Did things I'm not proud of, saw things I can't forget. He poked at the fire with a stick. After it ended, I couldn't go back to regular life. Everything felt wrong, too small, too peaceful. So I came out here where the quiet's different, where you earn your survival every day instead of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Do you regret it? Coming out here? Some days, most days, no. Out here things are honest. A storm doesn't lie about being a storm. A mountain doesn't pretend to be easy. People back in towns, they lie all the time. To themselves, most of all. Mei Lin understood that. She'd lived in those lies for 3 years in Willow Ridge, pretending she could belong if she just worked hard enough, kept quiet enough, disappeared enough. I like the honesty too, she said, even when it's brutal. Especially when it's brutal. They reached the trading post the next afternoon. It was bigger than Mei Lin expected, a cluster of buildings around a central store with corrals for horses and a small hotel for travelers. People moved between buildings, busy with their own lives. Most were white, but she saw a few Native Americans, a couple of Mexicans, even another Chinese man loading supplies onto a mule. She wasn't the only one. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She wasn't the only one. Come on, Hale said. I'll introduce you to Marcus. Marcus ran the trading post, a barrel-chested black man with gray threading through his beard and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He clasped Hale's hand warmly. Hale, you old dog. Heard you were dead. Not yet. Who's this? Marcus's gaze fell on Mei Lin, assessing but not unkind. Mei Lin. She's working Silver Creek with me. Best cook those miners have ever had. High praise from Hale. He doesn't compliment easy. Marcus extended his hand and Mei Lin shook it, surprised by the gesture. Welcome. Any friend of Hale's is welcome here. Inside the store, Marcus showed them supplies while catching up with Hale. Maylin wandered, looking at goods she hadn't seen in months. Real coffee, sugar, bolts of fabric, small luxuries that made her fingers itch to touch them. A woman approached her, native, maybe 30, with long dark hair and wearing a mixture of traditional and European clothing. "You're new," the woman observed. "Yes, I'm Mei Lin." "Sarah," she smiled. "Not a lot of women come through here. You with Hale?" "I work for him at Silver Creek." "Brave. That's rough country and rougher men." Sarah's eyes were knowing. "You need anything while you're here, you find me. I run the hotel. Sometimes women need a place away from all the men, you understand?" Maylin understood perfectly. "Thank you. We look out for each other. Have to, in places like this." That evening, Hale took Maylin to the hotel dining room. It was the first time she'd eaten in a public space in months. The first time she'd sat at a table with other people who weren't minors shoveling food while complaining about their claims. She was nervous, hyper-aware of eyes on her, of being the only Chinese woman in the room. But no one bothered her. A few people nodded to Hale, some greeted him by name. They looked at Maylin with curiosity but not hostility. "This place is different," she said. "Marcus doesn't tolerate trouble. You cause problems here, you're banned for life. Word gets around. No one wants to lose access to the only decent trading post in 300 miles. Hale cut into his steak. "It's not perfect, but it's better than most places." Later, Sarah found them and joined their table uninvited, bringing a bottle of whiskey. "For old times," she said to Hale. "You two know each other?" Maylin asked. "Hale saved my brother from a bad situation a few years back. We've been friends since." Sarah poured drinks for all three of them. "So, Maylin, what brings a Chinese woman to Silver Creek?" "She's escaping a town that tried to destroy her," Hale said bluntly. "Same reason most people end up in the mountains." "Running from something or running towards something?" Maylin considered the question. "Both, maybe. I'm running from what I was, running toward, I don't know yet, something better." Sarah raised her glass. "I'll drink to that, to running toward better." They drank. The whiskey burned going down but warmed her from the inside. Maylin felt something loosen in her chest, tension she hadn't known she was carrying. For the first time since leaving Willow Ridge, she wasn't the only woman, wasn't the only person of color, wasn't the only outsider. Here, at this table, she was just herself. The next morning, they loaded supplies and prepared to head back. Marcus pulled Maylin aside while Hale was settling accounts. "He's a good man, Hale. Doesn't let many people get close. The fact that he brought you here means he trusts you." Marcus's expression turned serious. "But trust goes both ways. You watch his back up there in Silver Creek. Something's been off the last few months. People talking about strikes that didn't happen, claims that stopped producing. Makes men desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. I'll watch out for him." "Good. And remember, you're always welcome here. Things get bad, you need to leave, you come here. We'll help you." The ride back to Silver Creek felt different. Maylin had allies now, people who'd help if she needed it. The isolation that had pressed down on her for months had lifted slightly, but Marcus's warning nagged at her. Desperate men, stupid things. They returned to find the camp in an uproar. One of the claims had collapsed, trapping 2 men underground. By the time they were dug out, one was dead and the other badly injured. The whole camp was shaken. Dutch organized a burial the next day. The men gathered, rough and uncomfortable in the face of death. Someone said a few words. They lowered the body into frozen ground and piled rocks on top because digging was too hard. Maylin watched from a distance. She hadn't known the dead man well. He'd been quiet, kept to himself, but his death settled over the camp like a fog. Reminder that this life could end in an instant, that the mountains didn't care about your plans or dreams. That night, the cookhouse was silent. Men ate quickly and left, no one wanting to linger. Even Carter seemed subdued. Hale found Maylin scrubbing pots with too much force, working out her anxiety on stubborn grease. "You okay?" he asked. "I didn't know him, but I keep thinking that could have been you, under that beam in the winter, if I hadn't found you when I did. But you did find me, and I'm fine. This time." He was quiet for a moment. "Death's always close out here. You know that. Every day you survive is a victory. Every night you make it through is a win. You can't live afraid of what might happen. How do you not be afraid? I didn't say don't be afraid. I said don't live afraid. There's a difference. He picked up a towel and started drying dishes beside her. Fear's normal, smart even. It keeps you careful. But if you let it run your life, you might as well be dead already. Maylin thought about the woman she'd been in Willow Ridge, so afraid of everything that she'd stopped living. Just existing, day to day, waiting for permission to be human. I'm not that person anymore, she said. No, you're not. Over the next weeks, the camp slowly settled back into routine. The snow melted completely. Creeks ran high with meltwater. The miners worked their claims with renewed energy, hoping to strike it rich before winter came again. Maylin's role expanded. She wasn't just cooking anymore. She was managing supplies, negotiating with Dutch about orders, even handling disputes between miners about kitchen equipment. Without quite meaning to, she'd become essential to the camp's functioning. Some men resented it, Carter especially, but most just accepted her, the way you accept weather or terrain. She was part of Silver Creek now. One afternoon, a group of miners from a different camp showed up. 5 rough men looking for work and willing to undercut Silver Creek's crew on wages. Dutch met with them in the main building. Maylin was serving dinner when they came into the cookhouse. They swaggered in, loud and aggressive, making themselves at home. She recognized the type. Men who thought their presence alone was worth respect. One of them, the loudest, looked at Maylin and grinned. Well now, didn't expect this kind of service. She ignored him, kept filling plates. Hey, I'm talking to you, sweetheart. Food's on the table, help yourself. I'd rather you helped me. He moved closer. What else you serve besides dinner? Maylin set down the ladle carefully. Nothing. Come on, don't be like that. A pretty thing like you, stuck in a camp full of men? You must get lonely. The cookhouse had gone quiet. The Silver Creek miners were watching, waiting to see what would happen. Hale was at the far end of the room, already rising from his seat, but Maylin didn't need rescuing. Leave, she said clearly. Now. The man laughed. Or what? Maylin pulled the pistol from her apron and aimed it at his chest. Her hand was steady. Or I'll put a hole in you and feed you to the bears. Your choice. The man's smile died. He looked at the pistol, at Maylin's unwavering gaze, and reconsidered his options. Just joking around, he muttered. I'm not. Maylin's voice was cold. Get out of my cookhouse. He left. His friends followed. The door slammed behind them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Danny started clapping. Others joined in. Not all of them, but enough. A smattering of applause that acknowledged what had just happened. Maylin lowered the pistol, her heart hammering. She'd just pulled a gun on someone, threatened to shoot him, and meant it. Hale caught her eye across the room. He nodded once, a gesture of approval and something else. Pride, maybe. That night, Dutch came to the cookhouse. Those men left. Won't be working here. Good. Marcus sent word there's been trouble at other camps. Men getting aggressive with women, couple of assaults. He wanted me to make sure it's clear. That won't fly here. It's clear. Dutch shifted his weight. You handled yourself well today. Most women would have screamed or froze up. I'm not most women. No, you're not. He paused at the door. Silver Creek's better with you here. Just wanted you to know that. After he left, Maylin sat in her small room and thought about what had happened. She'd drawn a weapon. Could have killed someone. A few months ago, the idea would have horrified her. Now? Now she felt calm, certain. She'd protected herself because no one else would. She'd stood her ground because the ground was hers to stand on. The woman from Willow Ridge was truly dead. Whoever Maylin was becoming, she was someone new. Spring turned to summer. The days grew long, the sun strong enough to burn her skin if she wasn't careful. Maylin spent her free time learning from Hale. More shooting practice, tracking, how to read the forest for signs of game or danger. Why do I need to know all this? She asked one afternoon after he'd spent an hour teaching her to identify edible plants. Because I won't always be here. The words hit her harder than expected. Where are you going? Nowhere right now, but eventually, maybe. I'm a trader. I move around, and you need to be able to take care of yourself. I can take care of myself. I know, but you can be better at it. There's no ceiling on capable. So she learned and practiced and grew stronger. The miners noticed the change. She carried herself differently now, no longer trying to take up less space. When she walked through camp, she didn't lower her eyes or hug the edges. She walked right down the middle, and people moved for her. It wasn't just about the gun, though that helped. It was about something fundamental that had shifted inside her. She'd stopped apologizing for existing. In July, Hale told her they were going to the trading post again. Already? We just went 3 months ago. Marcus wants to introduce you to someone. Might be good for you. Maylin was curious, but Hale wouldn't say more. They made the trip in good weather this time, the journey easier without snow and ice. At the trading post, Sarah was waiting. She hugged Maylin like they were old friends. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. She led Maylin to a small cabin behind the hotel. Inside, a Chinese woman was sorting herbs, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She was older, maybe 50, with gray streaking her black hair. This is Lin Wei, Sarah said. She runs a boarding house 2 days north of here, takes in women who need work or refuge. Lin Wei looked up, studied Maylin with sharp eyes. You're the one Hale brought out of Willow Ridge. Yes, I heard about that place. Heard what they do to our people there. Lin Wei set down her herbs. You survived it. That takes strength. I had help. We all need help, no shame in that. She gestured for Maylin to sit. Sarah and Marcus thought we should meet, thought maybe we could help each other. How? I take in women, Chinese mostly, but not only. Women running from bad situations, bad marriages, bad towns. Give them work, teach them skills, help them build new lives. Always need more hands. Lin Wei's expression softened slightly. And always need more people who understand what it's like. Being foreign, being woman, being both at once. Maylin felt something crack open in her chest. You're offering me work? I'm offering you options. You want to stay at Silver Creek, fine. Hale says you're doing good there. But if you ever want something different, my door's open. Why? Because I was you once, alone in a country that hated me, no family, no prospects. Someone helped me. I help others now. That's how we survive, by lifting each other up. Maylin looked at this woman who'd built something from nothing, who'd created safety in a place that offered none. Thank you. I'll remember that. You do that. And remember, you're not alone, even when it feels like you are. That night, Sarah, Lin Wei, Maylin, and 2 other women from the trading post had dinner together. They talked and laughed and shared stories, some funny, some heartbreaking, all true. Maylin learned about Sarah's journey from her tribe to this trading post, about Lin Wei's escape from an abusive husband, about the other women's various paths to this place. They were all survivors, all fighters, all refusing to let the world define them. For the first time since leaving China, Maylin felt like she belonged somewhere. Not to a place exactly, but to a community of women who understood. The ride back to Silver Creek felt different, lighter somehow. Hale noticed? You're smiling. I met people like me. People who understand. Good. You should have that. He paused. Lin Wei's offer, it's real. If you ever want to leave, I won't stand in your way. I know, but I'm not ready to leave yet. What are you waiting for? Maylin thought about it. I'm not waiting. I'm building. Building something at Silver Creek. Building myself into someone strong enough to handle whatever comes next. Hale smiled. You're already strong enough. You just needed to see it. They returned to find the camp in better spirits. A few claims had hit decent veins of gold. Money was flowing. Men were optimistic again. But Carter's group was quieter than usual. Plotting something, Maylin suspected. She stayed alert, kept the pistol close. The confrontation came 2 weeks later. Maylin was in the cookhouse early, starting breakfast, when Carter and 3 other men walked in. The sun wasn't even up yet. No one else was around. We need to talk, Carter said. Maylin's hand drifted to her apron pocket. About? About you leaving, for good this time. I'm not going anywhere. See, we think you are. We've been talking to Dutch, explained how it's not right, you taking work from people who deserve it, how Hale's making bad decisions because he's thinking with the wrong parts. And what did Dutch say? Carter's smile was ugly. Doesn't matter what he said, matters what we say. This is our camp. We built it. You're just a visitor who overstayed her welcome. The other men fanned out, blocking the exits. Maylin's heart rate picked up, but she kept her expression calm. Hale won't let you run me off. Hale's down at the South Claim. Won't be back till this afternoon. By then, you'll be long gone. Or what? You'll force me out? If we have to. Mei Lin pulled the pistol and aimed it at Carter's head. Try it. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the stove. Then the door opened and Danny walked in, followed by 5 other miners. They spread out, standing between Mei Lin and Carter's group. Problem here? Danny asked mildly. Carter's face reddened. This isn't your business. Seems like it is. Mei Lin's part of this camp. You got a problem with her, you take it to Dutch or Hale. You don't corner her in the cookhouse at dawn like a coward. Who you calling a coward? You. I'm calling you a coward. Danny's voice hardened. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. Most of us are fine with Mei Lin. She works hard, cooks good food, doesn't cause trouble. You're the one causing trouble. One of Carter's friends shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should... Shut up, Carter snapped. But the moment had broken. His support was fracturing. Leave, Mei Lin said quietly. Now, before this gets worse. Carter looked at her, at the pistol still aimed at his head, at Danny and the others backing her up. His jaw worked like he wanted to say something more, but he wasn't stupid enough to push it. This isn't over, he muttered. Yeah, it is, Danny said. It's over and you lost. Get out. They left. Mei Lin lowered the pistol, her hand shaking now that the danger had passed. Danny came over. You okay? Yes, thank you. We meant what we said. You're one of us now. Anyone tries to run you off, they answer to more than just Hale. The other men nodded agreement. Not all 40 miners, but enough to matter. Mei Lin felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. I won't forget this. Nothing to forget. We look out for our own. When Hale returned that afternoon, Dutch had already told him what happened. He found Mei Lin in the cookhouse, preparing dinner with hands that had finally stopped shaking. I heard. I'm fine. I know you are, but I'm still sorry I wasn't here. Danny was, and others. I wasn't alone. Hale studied her face. No, you weren't. You've built something here, Mei Lin. Real friendships, real respect. That's not nothing. It feels like everything. That night, Dutch called a camp meeting. All 40 miners gathered in the main building. Carter stood in the back, his expression sullen. We got a problem, Dutch began. Some people think Mei Lin doesn't belong here. Think she's taking something that's not hers. I want to settle this once and for all. Show of hands. Who wants Mei Lin to leave? Carter's hand went up. 4 others joined him, 5 out of 40. And who wants her to stay? 35 hands rose. Danny's first, then others, a forest of agreement. Dutch nodded. There's your answer, Carter. You don't like it, you're free to leave, but Mei Lin stays. Carter's face went dark red. This is wrong. This whole situation is... Vote's over. Decision's made. Dutch's voice was final. Anyone can't live with it. Pack your gear. Carter stayed, so did his friends. But they knew they'd lost. The camp had chosen Mei Lin over them. Later, alone in her room, Mei Lin let herself cry. Not from fear or sadness, but from relief. From gratitude. From the overwhelming realization that she'd gone from being someone no one would defend to someone people actively chose to protect. She'd earned that. Through hard work and courage and refusing to disappear. She'd earned her place here, and no one could take it away. Summer deepened into the kind of heat that made the mountains shimmer. Mei Lin had never experienced weather like this, hot during the day, cold enough at night that you still needed a fire. The contrast felt like the place itself couldn't decide what it wanted to be. She understood the feeling. Carter left a week after the vote, packed his gear without a word, and walked out of camp with his closest friend. The other 3 who'd sided with him stayed, but they kept their distance now, sullen but contained. Dutch made it clear that the next person who caused trouble would be gone permanently. No discussion. The camp settled into an uneasy peace. Mei Lin went about her work, but something had shifted. The miners who'd stood up for her treated her differently now, not with the careful politeness of strangers, but with the easy familiarity of equals. They asked her opinion on things beyond cooking. They included her in conversations. They made room for her at the table without thinking about it. She belonged. The realization hit her one evening while serving dinner. Danny was arguing with another miner about the best way to shore up a tunnel. They both turned to Mei Lin. "What do you think?" Danny asked. A year ago, she would have demurred, insisted she didn't know enough. Now she considered the question seriously. "I think you're both right. Use Tom's method for the main supports, Danny's technique for the crossbeams. Combine them." They looked at each other, then nodded. That could work. It was a small thing, a tiny moment, but it meant everything. Hale noticed the change, too. They were sitting outside the cookhouse one night, watching stars emerge, when he said, "You've found your footing. Took long enough. Some things can't be rushed. Building yourself takes time." Mei Lin glanced at him. "Is that what you've been doing? Building yourself? Rebuilding, more like. After the war, I was broken. Took years out here to put the pieces back together. Still not sure I got them all in the right places." "I think you did fine." He smiled faintly. "You're generous." They sat in comfortable silence. Over the months, they'd developed an ease with each other that Mei Lin valued more than she could express. Hale didn't demand anything from her, didn't expect her to be grateful or deferential or anything other than herself. He just accepted her. It was the first healthy relationship with a man she'd ever had. "I need to tell you something," Hale said after a while. Mei Lin's stomach tightened. "What?" "I'm thinking about settling down, building a real homestead instead of just trading." He looked out at the darkness. "There's a valley about 20 miles west of here. Good land, water, sheltered. Been thinking about claiming it, building something permanent." "That sounds good. You'd be happy there." "I want you to come with me." The words hung in the air between them. Mei Lin's heart started racing. "What?" "Not like that," Hale said quickly. That's not what I mean. I mean, as a partner, equal shares. We build the homestead together, work it together. You'd have your own space, your own life, but we'd be in it together." Mei Lin stared at him. "Why?" "Because we work well together. Because I trust you and I think you trust me. Because out here, survival's easier with someone watching your back." He met her eyes. "And because you're the best friend I've had in 20 years. I don't want to lose that." "Friend." The word settled into her chest, warm and certain. "You're my best friend, too." "So is that a yes?" "I need time to think about it." "Take all the time you need. The valley's not going anywhere." That night, Mei Lin lay awake turning it over in her mind. A homestead. Partnership with Hale. Building something from nothing in a valley 20 miles from the nearest people. Part of her was terrified. She'd just found stability at Silver Creek. Just earned her place. Walking away felt like giving up hard-won ground. But another part of her, the part that had chosen to leave Willow Ridge, that had crossed mountains in winter, that had pulled a gun on Carter, that part whispered that this was the next step, that safety meant stagnation if you weren't careful, that she could be more than a camp cook, she could be a builder, a creator, a founder of something new. The idea grew roots. 3 days later, she found Hale checking supplies in the storage shed. "I want to see the valley first, before I decide." His face lit up. "When?" "This weekend, after I prep enough food to cover a few days." They left Saturday morning, just the two of them on horseback. Mei Lin had gotten better at riding, though she'd never love it the way Hale did. The horses tolerated her and she tolerated them back. The trail wound through dense forest, then opened onto a high meadow filled with wildflowers. Hale pointed out plants as they rode, which were edible, which had medicinal uses, which would kill you if you weren't careful. Mei Lin listened and remembered. Knowledge was survival out here. By afternoon, they reached the valley. It was beautiful, a wide basin surrounded by mountains with a creek running clear through the center. Trees clustered at the edges, but the valley floor was mostly meadow, ready for building. The land had good bones, Hale explained. Water, timber, shelter from the worst weather, game trails indicating plenty of hunting. "What do you think?" he asked. Mei Lin walked along the creek, letting the vision form. A cabin here, facing south for light. A garden there, close to the water. Storage buildings, a smokehouse, maybe even a small barn eventually. It would take years to build all of it, years of backbreaking work. But it would be theirs, not rented, not borrowed, not subject to anyone's permission. Theirs. "I think yes," she said. Hale's grin was like sunrise. "Yeah? Yeah, let's build something. They spent the rest of the day planning, walking the land, marking spots with stones. Hale sketched rough diagrams in the dirt with a stick. Mei Lin asked questions, offered ideas, pushed back when something didn't make sense. They were partners already. They just hadn't formalized it yet. That night, camping by the creek, Hale pulled out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving. To new beginnings, he said, pouring them each a measure. To building something unbreakable. They drank. The whiskey burned and warmed and felt like sealing a promise. We should put it in writing, Mei Lin said. The partnership. Equal shares, equal say. I want it documented. Smart. We'll have Marcus draw up papers next time we're at the trading post. And I want my own cabin, close to the main building but separate. Your own space. Got it. And if either of us wants to leave, we split everything fair. No fighting. Hale extended his hand. Deal. Mei Lin shook it. His grip was firm, calloused, honest. This was real. This was happening. They returned to Silver Creek with plans forming. They'd need to finish out the summer at camp. Hale to save more money. Mei Lin to train someone to take over cooking duties. Come fall, they'd start building. Get at least a basic shelter up before winter. Then spend the cold months finishing the interior, planning for spring. It would be hard. Maybe the hardest thing either of them had ever done. But hard didn't scare Mei Lin anymore. The camp took the news better than expected. Dutch was disappointed to lose them, but understood. You've earned the right to build something of your own, he told Mei Lin. Danny was excited. You'll have visitors. We'll come see what you're building. Even the miners who'd been wary of her at first seemed genuinely happy for her. Over the summer, she'd proven herself. Now she was moving on to something bigger. And that felt right to everyone. In August, a letter arrived at the trading post. Marcus brought it when he came to Silver Creek to deliver supplies. For you, he said, handing Mei Lin an envelope. Woman named Anna sent it. Said she's been trying to track you down for months. Mei Lin's hands shook as she opened it. Anna's handwriting was cramped and messy, but the words were clear. The letter told of Willow Ridge burning, not the whole town, just the Chinese quarter. Someone had started a fire in the middle of the night. 3 people died. Everyone else scattered. Anna herself had left, heading to San Francisco where her cousin lived. She wanted Mei Lin to know she was safe, that she thought of her often, that leaving Willow Ridge was the best decision either of them had ever made. The letter ended with a question. Are you happy? Mei Lin sat with that for a long time. Was she happy? The word felt too simple for what she felt. She was challenged, exhausted, sometimes scared, often uncertain. But underneath all of that ran a current of something she'd never experienced before. Freedom, purpose, the bone-deep satisfaction of building a life on her own terms. Maybe that was happiness. Maybe happiness wasn't the absence of struggle, but the presence of meaning. She wrote back that night, telling Anna about Silver Creek, about Hale, about the valley and their plans. She described the mountains and the harsh beauty and the way she'd learned to survive. She ended with her own question. Come visit when you can. I want you to see what I've become. September brought the first frost. The miners worked longer hours, trying to squeeze out every possible ounce of gold before winter forced them to stop. Mei Lin trained a young man named Peter to take over the cooking. He was clumsy at first, burning more than he served, but he learned fast. You'll do fine, Mei Lin assured him after he'd managed a full week without disaster. Just remember, if the men complain, they can cook for themselves. Peter grinned. I'll remember that. Hale had been making runs to the valley, hauling lumber and supplies, getting a head start on construction. Each time he returned, he had stories of progress. Foundation laid, walls started, roof frame up. You need to come see it, he told Mei Lin. It's really taking shape. On her last day at Silver Creek, the miners threw her a party. It was awkward and sweet, rough men trying to express appreciation they didn't quite have words for. They gave her gifts, a new knife from Danny, a warm blanket from Dutch, a carved wooden box from Tom, who'd never spoken more than 10 words to her. For keeping us fed all this time, Dutch said, raising a cup, and for being tougher than most of us combined. For not shooting Carter when you had the chance, someone called out. Laughter. Cheers. Mei Lin felt her throat tighten with emotion. Thank you, she managed, for giving me a chance, for standing up when it mattered. for teaching me I was worth standing up for. The party went late. By the time Mei Lin finally made it to her small room, she was exhausted and a little drunk and happier than she'd been in years. The next morning, she and Hale loaded the wagon with her belongings and supplies for the homestead. The pile was bigger than when she'd arrived. She had more now. More possessions, more skills, more confidence, more of herself. As they pulled out of camp, Mei Lin looked back at the rough buildings, the men waving goodbye, the place that had given her space to grow. She'd arrived here broken and terrified. She was leaving whole and strong. No regrets? Hale asked. None. The valley felt different knowing it was home now. They spent the first week finishing the main cabin, a solid structure with a stone fireplace, real windows, and enough room for both of them to have private spaces. Hale took the loft. Mei Lin claimed a room on the ground floor with a door that locked. They built her cabin next. Smaller, just one room, but entirely hers. She could decorate it how she wanted, keep her own schedule, have privacy when she needed it. The separation was important. Partnership didn't mean losing yourself. By mid-October, both cabins were weather-tight. They spent the following weeks building a smokehouse, a root cellar, and a small barn. Hale hunted while Mei Lin preserved meat and foraged for the last edible plants before winter killed everything. They worked from dawn until dark, then collapsed by the fire, too tired to talk. It was brutal. Mei Lin's hands developed new calluses. Her back ached constantly. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. But every morning she woke up and chose it again. Chose the hard work and the uncertainty and the satisfaction of building something real. In November, the first major snow came. They were as ready as they could be, cabins stocked with food, firewood stacked high, winter supplies laid in. They settled into the slower rhythm of cold weather survival. Hale taught Mei Lin to make snowshoes and showed her how to track game in winter. She taught him recipes from her childhood, adapting them to the ingredients they had. They read books by candlelight, played cards, talked about everything and nothing. It was peaceful in a way Mei Lin had never experienced. No one to prove herself to, no one to fear. Just the quiet accumulation of days, each one survived, adding to the foundation of their life here. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire in the main cabin, Hale said, "I need to tell you something." Mei Lin looked up from the shirt she was mending. "What?" "I'm in love with you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, the needle frozen in her hand. "I know," Hale continued. "I know that's not what you signed up for. I know we agreed to partnership, nothing more. And I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I needed to be honest. I love you. Have for months now. Maybe since you saved me from that beam." Mei Lin's mind raced. She thought about Hale, his steady presence, his kindness, the way he'd never pushed or demanded or expected anything she wasn't willing to give. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how seen, and she realized, with a jolt of recognition, that she loved him too. Not the desperate, dependent love she'd seen destroy women in Willow Ridge. Something steadier, deeper, built on respect and trust and genuine partnership. "I love you too," she said quietly. Hale's expression shifted from braced for rejection to cautious hope. "You do?" "Yes. I think I have for a while. I just didn't know it was allowed." "Allowed?" "To love someone and still be myself. To be partners and equals and also more." Hale stood, crossed the room, knelt in front of her chair. "We can be whatever we want to be. Make our own rules." Mei Lin cupped his scarred face in her hands. "Then I want this. Us. However it looks." They kissed, tentative at first, then deeper. It felt right in a way nothing else ever had. This wasn't about need or power or desperation. It was about choice. They were choosing each other freely, with full knowledge of who they both were. That night, Mei Lin stayed in the main cabin. They talked until dawn, planning their future with the same care they'd planned the homestead. They wanted to build something bigger than just themselves, something that could help others the way they'd been helped. "We could make this a refuge," Mei Lin said, "like what Lin Wei has. A place where people running from bad situations can come, work, rebuild. We'd need more buildings, more supplies. Then we build them. Not this year, maybe not next, but eventually." Hale pulled her closer. "You want to save people." I want to offer what you offered me, a chance. Then that's what we'll do. Winter passed slowly, the two of them learning each other the way they'd learned the land. Hale was patient and careful, always asking permission, always making sure Mei Lin felt safe. She'd never had a lover who prioritized her comfort over his own desire. It changed everything. Spring came with rushing water and new growth. They planted a garden, built a chicken coop, expanded their plans. Hale made trips to the trading post for supplies, sometimes taking Mei Lin, sometimes going alone. Each time he returned with news, Marcus sent his regards. Sarah wanted them to visit. Lin Wei had mentioned possibly sending someone their way who needed work. The network was forming. People knew about their valley now, knew it as a place that might offer shelter. In May, their first visitor arrived. She appeared at the edge of the clearing one afternoon, a Mexican woman, maybe 19, with a black eye and a split lip and terror in her eyes. She held a small bundle that Mei Lin realized with a shock was a baby. Mei Lin set down the hoe she'd been using and walked over slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "Are you Mei Lin?" the woman asked in accented English. "Yes. Sarah at the trading post said you might help me, said you understand what it's like to run." Mei Lin looked at this young woman and saw herself a year ago, beaten, desperate, with nowhere to go. She saw the baby, maybe 3 months old, sleeping despite the chaos around it. She saw the opportunity to make good on the promise she and Hale had made. "What's your name?" Mei Lin asked gently. "Rosa." "You're safe here, Rosa. Come inside. Let's get you fed." Rosa burst into tears. Mei Lin helped her into the main cabin, got her settled by the fire, made tea while Hale appeared from the barn where he'd been working. He took in the scene, Rosa crying, the baby starting to fuss, Mei Lin moving with calm efficiency, and nodded once. This was what they'd prepared for. "I'll set up the guest room," he said. Over the next hours, Rosa's story emerged in pieces. An abusive husband, a family that sided with him, a desperate flight in the night with nothing but her baby and what she could carry. Sarah had found her half-starved at the trading post, remembered Mei Lin's story, made the connection. "You can stay as long as you need," Mei Lin told her. "We ask that you work, help with the garden, the cooking, whatever you can manage with the baby, but you're safe here. We don't tolerate violence. My husband will look for me." "Let him look. This valley's hard to find if you don't know where it is." Hale's voice was firm. "And if he does show up, he'll regret it." Rosa looked between them, trying to understand. "Why would you help me?" Mei Lin smiled. "Because someone helped me once. Now I help you. Someday you'll help someone else. That's how it works." Rosa stayed. She was quiet at first, jumpy at every sound, but gradually she relaxed. The baby thrived on regular food and safety. Rosa worked hard, learning from Mei Lin, contributing in the ways she could. By summer, she was smiling sometimes, singing to the baby in Spanish, making plans for what came next. "I want to go to my cousin in California eventually," she told Mei Lin. "Start fresh where no one knows me, but not yet. Not until I'm stronger. Take all the time you need. Build your strength here." 2 more women arrived before winter. 1 native, fleeing a forced marriage. 1 white, running from a brothel in a mining town. They all had different stories, but the same desperate need for safety. Mei Lin and Hale built more cabins, expanded the garden, organized the work so everyone contributed according to their abilities. Created rules. No violence, everyone works, decisions made together, respect for privacy. It was messy and imperfect. There were arguments about who did what, conflicts over supplies, moments when Mei Lin wanted to scream from frustration. But it worked. Slowly, carefully, it worked. The women healed, they learned skills, they made plans, and one by one, when they were ready, they moved on. To California, to Oregon, to family they'd reconnected with, to new lives they built from scratch. Rosa left in the spring, heading to her cousin with money saved and skills learned and her daughter healthy and happy. She hugged Mei Lin fiercely at the wagon. "Thank you for everything. Be safe. Be strong. Help someone when you can." "I will. I promise." Watching her go, Mei Lin felt something settle into place. This was the purpose she'd been building toward. Not just surviving, but creating space for others to survive too. Not just escaping, but offering escape. Hale came up beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. You did good. We did good. Fair enough, we did good. That night, lying in bed in the cabin they now shared most nights, Maylin said, I want to make this official, the refuge. Give it a name, spread the word through Sarah and Marcus and Lin Wei. Make it clear what we're offering. What would we call it? Maylin thought about it. Haven, simple, clear, a place where people can breathe. Haven. Hale tested the word. I like it. Haven it is. They fell asleep planning, dreaming, building toward a future neither of them could have imagined a year ago. Outside, the valley lay quiet under stars. Inside, something unbreakable was taking root. A partnership forged in survival, strengthened by love, expanded by purpose. Maylin had come to these mountains broken and alone. She'd rebuilt herself piece by piece, and now, with Hale beside her, she was building something even bigger. A place where broken people could become whole, where being different wasn't dangerous, where everyone deserved a chance. She'd found her purpose. Finally, after everything, she'd found where she belonged. 3 years passed like water over stone, slowly reshaping everything it touched. Haven grew from a desperate idea into something solid. 7 cabins now dotted the valley, each one built by the hands of women who'd arrived broken and left whole. The garden had expanded to feed 20 people at a time. A proper barn housed chickens, goats, and 2 milk cows Hale had traded for at Marcus's post. The root cellar was deep enough to keep vegetables through the hardest winter. Maylin stood at the edge of the garden one October morning, surveying the work of 3 years. She was 30 now, her hands permanently scarred from labor, her face weathered by mountain sun. She looked nothing like the terrified woman who'd fled Willow Ridge. Sometimes she couldn't even remember what that fear had felt like. Maylin! A young woman named Beth ran up, breathless. There's someone coming, a man. Maylin's hand went automatically to the pistol she now carried openly. Visitors were common, women fleeing bad situations, traders bringing supplies, friends from the trading post. But men alone were rare and usually meant trouble. Get everyone inside. Tell Hale. She walked to meet the stranger, rifle in hand this time. The man who emerged from the tree line was in his 50s, well-dressed for the wilderness, with a badge pinned to his vest that marked him as some kind of lawman. That's far enough, Maylin called out when he was still 20 yards away. The man stopped, hands visible. I'm looking for Maylin. Chinese woman, came through Willow Ridge a few years back. Why? Name's Marshall Garrett. I have some questions about a refuge you're running here. Maylin's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. What kind of questions? The kind that need answers. You willing to talk, or you planning to shoot me? She considered shooting him, but that would bring more problems than it solved. You can come closer, slow, hands where I can see them. Garrett approached carefully. Up close, his face was weathered but not cruel. His eyes assessed Haven with professional interest, the cabins, the garden, the subtle signs of organized life. Impressive setup, he said. How many people you got here? Depends on the day. Right now, 11 women, 3 children, and my partner. All women? No men except your partner? That's right. And these women, they come here voluntarily. Maylin's jaw tightened. What exactly are you suggesting, Marshall? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm investigating complaints that you're harboring runaway wives, helping women abandon their legal husbands, interfering with family matters that aren't your business. There it was, the accusation she'd been expecting for 3 years. Who filed the complaint? Multiple people. Husbands looking for their wives. Families looking for daughters. They say you're stealing women, corrupting them with ideas about independence. I've never stolen anyone. Women come here because they choose to. They leave when they choose to. That's not how their husbands see it. I don't particularly care how their husbands see it. Maylin met his gaze squarely. Marshall, you seem like a reasonable man. Let me ask you something. If a woman shows up here beaten half to death, baby in her arms, begging for help, what am I supposed to do? Send her back to the man who did that to her? Garrett's expression didn't change. The law says a man has rights over his wife and children. The law also said I wasn't fully human. The law said my people couldn't own property or testify in court. Forgive me if I don't find the law particularly trustworthy when it comes to protecting the vulnerable. That's a dangerous attitude. Maybe. But it's an honest one. They stared at each other. Hale appeared from the main cabin, rifle in hand, moving to stand beside Mei Lin. His presence was a statement. She wasn't alone in this. Problem here? Hale asked. Marshal Garrett. He's investigating complaints about Haven. What kind of complaints? Garrett repeated his accusations. Hale listened without interrupting, his face carved from stone. So you're here to what? Hale asked when the marshal finished. Arrest Mei Lin? Shut us down? I'm here to investigate. See if there's truth to the claims. And if there is? If we are helping women escape bad marriages, abusive families, what then? Then I'd have to enforce the law. Even if the law is wrong? Mei Lin asked. Garrett sighed, suddenly looking tired. Ma'am, I don't make the laws, I just enforce them. That's what every person who's ever done something terrible says. I was just following orders, just doing my job. Mei Lin's voice was steady but hard. At some point, you have to decide what you believe in more, the law or what's right. Those should be the same thing, but they're not. Not always. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. I'd like to talk to some of the women here, hear their stories. Mei Lin exchanged a glance with Hale. This could go badly, but refusing would only make them look guilty. All right, but no pressure, no intimidation. They talk if they want to, stay silent if they don't. Fair enough. Mei Lin gathered the women in the main cabin. They ranged in age from 17 to 45, came from different backgrounds, had different stories. But they all shared the common thread of having escaped something terrible. She explained the situation simply. A marshal is here investigating complaints that we're harboring runaway wives. He wants to hear your stories. You don't have to talk to him, but if you're willing, it might help. The women exchanged nervous glances. Finally, a woman named Catherine stood up. She was 32, had arrived a year ago with burn scars covering her arms where her husband had held her against a stove. I'll talk to him, Catherine said. One by one, others volunteered. Not all of them. Some were too afraid, too traumatized. But enough. Marshal Garrett interviewed them one at a time in Mei Lin's cabin. Mei Lin and Hale waited outside, unable to hear the conversations but watching the women's faces as they emerged. Some were crying, some looked angry. All of them looked determined. After the last interview, Garrett came out looking shaken. He sat on the cabin steps, pulled off his hat, ran his hand through his gray hair. Those stories, he said quietly. Are they what you expected? Mei Lin asked. I don't know what I expected, but not that. Not... He broke off. One woman showed me scars from where her husband stabbed her. Another described watching her husband kill her dog to teach her a lesson about obedience. Another was 14 when her family married her off to a man 3 times her age. And yet the law says those men have rights over these women. Garrett looked up at her. The law is an ass sometimes. So what are you going to do? He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the valley. Mei Lin could see him wrestling with something. Duty versus conscience, law versus morality. I'm going to report that I investigated and found no evidence of wrongdoing, he said finally. That the women here are all adults who came voluntarily and are free to leave whenever they choose. That this is a work collective, not a prison or a brothel or whatever the hell those husbands are claiming. Mei Lin felt something release in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm doing what should have been done all along, listening to the women instead of just believing the men. He stood, settled his hat back on his head. But I need to warn you, this won't be the end of it. Those husbands, those families, they're not going to stop. They'll try other ways to get what they want. Let them try. We'll be ready. Garrett studied her face. I believe you will be. He mounted his horse, then paused. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing here is good, necessary. There should be more places like this. There will be, eventually. He nodded once and rode away. That night, the women gathered to celebrate. Someone had saved a bottle of wine, another had baked a special bread. They ate and drank and told stories, the relief palpable. They'd been afraid of being torn away from this place, sent back to the hells they'd escaped. Now, at least temporarily, they were safe. But Mei Lin couldn't shake Garrett's warning. He was right. This wasn't over. It came 3 months later in the dead of winter. A group of 6 men arrived at Haven just after dawn. Maylin spotted them from her cabin window. Rough types, not marshals or lawmen, but hired muscle. The kind of men who did dirty work for money. She grabbed her rifle and ran for the main cabin, shouting for everyone to get inside. Hale met her at the door, already armed. "How many?" he asked. "6, maybe more in the trees." The women and children were herded into the back rooms. Catherine and 2 others who'd learned to shoot took positions at the windows. It wasn't much of a defense, but it was what they had. The men stopped 50 yards from the main cabin. Their leader, a thick-necked man with a scar across his cheek, shouted, "We're here for our property. Send out the women and nobody gets hurt." Maylin stepped onto the porch, rifle aimed. "There's no property here, just people, and they're not going anywhere. We got legal papers. These women belong to their husbands. People don't belong to people. Not anymore. War settled that. That was about coloreds, not wives." "You think there's a difference?" Maylin's voice was cold. "You think one kind of ownership is acceptable but another isn't? They're both wrong." The man spat. "This is your last chance. Send them out or we come in and take them." "You're welcome to try." The standoff stretched. Maylin could feel sweat running down her back despite the cold. 6 armed men against what? 3 people who could actually shoot? The math wasn't good. Then movement in the trees caught her eye. More people emerging, but not reinforcements for the hired men. Danny, from Silver Creek. Marcus, from the trading post. Sarah. Lin Wei. Dutch. A dozen people, all armed, spreading out to surround Haven. "Seems like your odds just got worse," Hale called out to the hired men. The leader looked around, recalculating. His men were shifting nervously, no longer confident in their numerical advantage. "This isn't over," the leader said. "Yeah, it is," Danny's voice carried across the clearing. "You boys are outgunned and outsmarted. Time to leave." A long, tense moment. Then the hired men backed away, mounted their horses, and rode off. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a postponement. When they were gone, Maylin's legs almost gave out. Hale caught her, held her steady. "How did you know to come?" she asked the group now gathering in the clearing. "Garrett sent word," Marcus said. "Told us he'd heard rumors of men being hired to raid Haven. We came as fast as we could." "Thank you, all of you." Sarah hugged her tight. "We protect our own. You know that." That night, with friends camped around Haven keeping watch, Maylin and Hale sat by the fire in their cabin. "This is going to keep happening," Hale said. "Every woman who escapes to here is another husband who feels wronged, another family that wants their property back. We can't fight them all." "I know. So what do we do?" Maylin stared into the flames. She thought about the women sleeping in the cabins, about the children who'd found safety here, about the future they were all building together. She thought about backing down, making Haven less visible, turning away women who needed help. She couldn't do it, wouldn't do it. "We fight," she said, "however we can, and we build bigger, stronger, louder. We make Haven so well known, so established, that shutting it down becomes too much trouble. We get the law on our side." How? By changing it. It was an audacious plan, ridiculous even. A Chinese woman and a scarred mountain man thinking they could change laws that had stood for generations. But what other choice did they have? Over the next year, Maylin became a different kind of fighter. She traveled to settlements and towns, speaking to anyone who would listen about what Haven represented. She wrote letters to newspapers, to politicians, to women's groups in eastern cities. She told stories, not just hers, but all the stories of women who'd passed through Haven. Some people called her a radical, a troublemaker, an ungrateful immigrant who didn't know her place. The usual accusations. But others listened. Other women, tired of being property. Men who'd seen their sisters or daughters abused. People who believed, however quietly, that the current system was broken. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, something shifted. Articles appeared in newspapers about the refuge in the mountains where women could rebuild their lives. A female journalist visited and wrote a glowing piece that ran in papers across the West. A lawyer in Oregon offered to help defend Haven's legal right to exist. The pushback was fierce. Churches denounced Maylin as corrupting the natural order. Husbands' rights groups formed to fight what they saw as the destruction of the family. Death threats arrived by mail. But Haven endured. Then came the case that changed everything. A woman named Eliza had escaped to Haven after her husband beat her unconscious and threatened to kill their daughter. The husband sued, demanding his wife and child be returned to him. The case went to court. Maylin testified. So did Eliza, showing the judge scars, telling her story in a voice that shook but never broke. Other women from Haven testified about what they'd endured, what they'd survived. The judge was old, conservative, by all accounts unlikely to rule in their favor. But he sat through 3 days of testimony, listening to story after story of abuse and survival. When he rendered his decision, his voice was grave. The law may grant a husband certain rights over his wife, but no law grants any person the right to brutalize another. Mrs. Eliza Henderson is granted a legal separation from her husband, with full custody of her child. Mr. Henderson is ordered to stay away from them both. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A crack in the foundation of absolute husband rights, a precedent that could be built on. News of the decision spread. More women came to Haven, not just running from immediate danger, but seeking that same legal protection. Maylin and Hale had to build more cabins, expand operations, create systems to handle the growing numbers. It was overwhelming, exhausting. Some days Maylin wanted to walk away from all of it, go back to the simple life of just her and Hale in their valley. But she couldn't. Too many people depended on what they'd built. 5 years after the marshal's visit, Maylin stood on the porch of the main cabin and surveyed a valley transformed. 20 buildings now, 40 women and children, a school where they taught reading and writing and practical skills, a workshop where women learned trades that could support them when they left, a legal fund to help them fight for their freedom in court. Haven had become more than a refuge. It was a community, a movement, a living argument that women deserved better than what the world offered them. Hale came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Tired? Always. Regret any of it? She leaned back against him. Not for a second. That evening, a young Chinese woman arrived at Haven. She was maybe 21, beaten and desperate, clutching a letter that had traveled across territories to reach her. "Are you Mei Lin?" she asked in Cantonese. "Yes. My aunt told me about you, said you help women like us, said you give chances." The girl's voice broke. "I need a chance." Mei Lin looked at this young woman and saw herself 7 years ago, terrified, alone, with nowhere to turn. She saw every woman who'd ever come to Haven carrying that same desperate hope. She saw the cycle continuing, women helping women, survivors creating safety for others who'd need to survive. "What's your name?" Mei Lin asked gently in the same language. "Jade." "Come inside, Jade. Let's get you warm and fed. Then we'll figure out what comes next." Jade burst into tears. Mei Lin held her while she cried, this stranger who'd become instantly familiar. She made the same silent promise she'd made to every woman who'd walked through Haven's boundaries. "You are safe here. You are valued here. You are human here." Later that night, after Jade had been settled in a cabin with food and clean clothes and women who understood, Mei Lin sat with Hale by their fire. "Do you ever think about how things could have gone differently?" she asked. "If you hadn't stepped in that day in Willow Ridge?" "I try not to. What's the point?" "I think about it sometimes. How I was one decision away from dying in that town. How my whole life pivoted on you choosing to help someone you didn't know." Hale was quiet. "I think about it too. How finding you gave me purpose again. How I'd been drifting, and then suddenly I had a reason to build something bigger than myself. We saved each other." "Yeah, we did." Mei Lin stared into the flames, thinking about all the lives that had intersected with hers. Rosa and her baby, now thriving in California. Catherine, who just left to open her own boarding house for women in Oregon. Eliza and her daughter, living free for the first time. Jade, just beginning her journey toward healing. The numbers were small in the grand scheme of things. Haven had helped maybe 60 women directly, but those 60 women had gone on to help others, who helped others, ripples spreading outward in ways impossible to track. Maybe that was how change happened, not in grand sweeping revolutions, but in individual moments of choosing to help instead of looking away. In saying yes when it would be easier to say no, and standing up when everyone else sat down. Maylin had learned something essential in these mountains. Your worth wasn't determined by how others valued you. It was determined by how you chose to live, by whether you let the world make you smaller or fought to take up the space you deserved. She thought about the woman she'd been in Willow Ridge, so certain of her own worthlessness that she'd barely fought back when they beat her. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who'd built a refuge with her bare hands, who'd faced down marshals and hired guns, who'd stood in court and demanded the law acknowledge women as human. Someone who'd learned that strength didn't mean never being afraid. It meant being afraid and doing it anyway. The fire crackled. Outside, the valley lay peaceful under stars. In the cabins, women slept safely, many for the first time in years. Tomorrow they'd wake and work and learn and heal. Tomorrow, Maylin would teach and organize and fight for their futures. Tomorrow, she'd do it all again. But tonight, she sat with the man she loved and let herself feel grateful. Not for the hardship, she'd never romanticized suffering, but for what had grown from it, for the life she'd built from the wreckage of the life that had almost destroyed her. "We did something good here," Hale said quietly. "We did something necessary," Maylin corrected. "Good is just a bonus." He smiled at that. They sat in comfortable silence, two scarred survivors who'd found each other in the wilderness and built something unbreakable. Maylin didn't believe in destiny or fate or any grand plan. She believed in choices, in the accumulation of small decisions that shaped a life, in the power of saying, "I deserve better," and then fighting for it. She'd come to America following promises that turned out to be lies. She'd survived a town that tried to erase her. She'd crossed mountains that should have killed her. She'd built a refuge from nothing but will and work and the unwavering belief that people deserve dignity. And now, 7 years after crawling bloody in the mud while a town watched her suffer, Maylin sat in her own home, in her own valley, surrounded by evidence that one person's choice to fight back could echo in ways impossible to predict. She hadn't just survived. She hadn't just escaped. She'd built a new world, small, imperfect, still fighting for every inch of ground, but real. Undeniable. A place where the old rules didn't apply, where being different wasn't dangerous, where women could define their own worth. Somewhere in the darkness, Jade was sleeping safely. Tomorrow she'd wake to her first morning free from fear. The day after, she'd start learning that she was more than what her abusers had told her. Eventually, when she was ready, she'd leave Haven stronger than she arrived. And maybe, years from now, she'd offer someone else the same chance that Maylin had offered her. That was the real victory. Not the buildings, or the legal precedents, or the newspaper articles. The real victory was in breaking the cycle, in refusing to let cruelty be the only legacy passed down. Maylin leaned her head against Hale's shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, the solid warmth of another survivor. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked. She thought about all the tomorrows stretching ahead, the work, the fights, the women who'd need help, the systems that still needed changing. It was endless, overwhelming, and absolutely worth it. "Ready," she said. Because that was the truth she'd learned in these mountains, the lesson carved into her bones through years of survival and building and fighting and refusing to quit. You didn't need to be perfect to be worthy. You didn't need permission to exist. You didn't need the world's approval to build something that mattered. You just needed to choose yourself, and then keep choosing day after day until that choice became who you were. Maylin had chosen, and in choosing, she'd transformed from a woman left to die in the mud into a foundation others could build on, into proof that the world could be different if only you were brave enough to make it so. The fire burned low, the stars wheeled overhead, and in a valley hidden in the mountains, a refuge called Haven stood as testament to what happened when someone decided that being broken wasn't the same as being defeated. It stood, and it would keep standing. Because some things, once built right, become unbreakable.